Hello, everyone. Today, what we're going to be talking about is disability microaggressions. So, we're going to talk about how people with disabilities are impacted by this, whether through life, society, in schools. So, I talk a little bit about special education and disability. I have a PhD in SPED, and a lot of the videos may talk about that, but then also other topics in education. So this channel is called Take the Meat, Spit Out the Bones. I'm going to give you some meat. You may have some bones, so just spit those out. And yeah, just take the message and think about your actions. Think about how your words can impact people, or think about, you as a person, you may have a disability, and how you may internalize some of these messages that you're getting, from just interacting with people every single day, because microaggressions are the everyday. So we're going to just talk about two definitions. I always like to ground everything in some definitions and then also some research. So we're going to be focused on one article today from research. So what we're going to do right now, I'm going to show you, this is a definition of disability. Disability is a physical or mental condition that substantially limits one or more of a person's major life activities. So this could be reading, writing, walking, chewing, swallowing, driving, anything that you have to do as a part of life, right? So what is actually a microaggression? So actually, let me see if I make this a little bigger. Oh, it came out a little small. Okay, I didn't mean for the end to be like that. But anyway, so this is actually one of the leading experts in America on microaggressions. His name is Darrell Sue. I believe he is a professor at Columbia University. He said microaggressions refer to brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, and environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative racial, gender, sexual orientation, and religious slights and insults to the target person or group. So he didn't really include disability in this, but now it has been included because we have an article rather. I think it was a chapter that was written. This was the chapter that was written. This is a book from a book, and this chapter is called Microaggressive Experiences of People with Disabilities. So they developed a taxonomy of microaggressions for people with disabilities. So this was written by Keller and Gal, right? And the participants talked about having experienced in their life various microaggressive encounters with people due to their disability. So there was a total of 12 self-identified people with disabilities were recruited from two organizations specializing in serving people with disabilities, and were sorted into two focus groups. So there are 5 males, 7 females, 8 white Americans, 2 Latin Americans, and 2 African Americans. So, and they reported to have disabilities. So what they have experienced, we're going to talk about some of a table from this article, and I definitely prompt you or urge you to read this. This is going to be in the description box. So I want to show you some of the things that they have experienced, and some of the things that I have experienced that people have done in front of me when it comes to talking to or slighting people with disabilities. So again, let me just let's just go back to this definition again. So microaggressions, they're brief and commonplace daily verbal. So it can be verbal, it can be how you behave towards one another. Also, the environment can be microaggressive too, right? It could be intentional, unintentional. And I have problems with the word unintentional because we're assuming people are very naive. And I don't think people are naive. I think they're very clear on what they're doing, and they're so used to doing it. Maybe this is just how society is. But, he says unintentional, and I understand that, right? They can communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative things towards someone who may have a disability. These are insults to a person or to a group. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what they saw in this article, or rather this chapter from Keller Gal, talking about the microaggressive experiences with people with disabilities. So some of the things that they found were that they were denied a personal identity. So we oftentimes, when we talk about people with disabilities, if you notice, I've been consistently saying people, I put the person first. So some people with disabilities want to be identified as their disability because their disability is so profound in their life, such as people who are blind or deaf, or who may have autism spectrum disorder. They may want to be identified as a disability first. But oftentimes in society, what we do, we kind of negate the child or a person as a person or a child, and we oftentimes talk about their disability first. So we call them a disabled person, or they're disabled, or a SPED kid, or IEP kid, or low kid, right? We're always defining them based on their disability. So, and then we get surprised if they do things like everyone else does, like get married or have kids. Like, oh wow, you're married, oh wow, you got a boo. Like, really? I can't have the things you have, right? Also, what they these 12 individuals that they studied, they found that people were denying their experience of having a disability, right? Saying, oh, come on, we all have some type of disability. We're all one family, right? So no, I may have certain issues and biases and discriminations and inaccessibility to opportunities and life experiences because of my disability. So do not deny that I don't have this, right? So that you can liken this to sexism, right? A lot of women may say, hey, oh, this neighborhood is safe. Everyone is safe here. But trust me, every woman knows that they caution walking on a street at night by themselves. Oftentimes, men may not have those concerns. And, some people may argue, what kind of men? But okay, what different race? I mean, when it comes to what kind of men. So, but apart from that, denial of privacy. This is a huge issue because a lot of people want to know what happened to you, right? Like if you are, walking with crutches or in a wheelchair, or you may have a visible disability, right? Or you may be a parent of a child with a disability. People like, oh, what happened? Oh, they have intellectual disability. Were they a preemie? Where, like, you have to explain why someone has a disability. Let me just say, the World Health Organization says 15% of every population has a disability. And I must say, everyone will get a disability in their lifetime. So do you want to be explaining your disability every single day of your life, right? Does a parent want to be explaining their child's disability every day of their life? Of course not. Like, make them have some privacy, right? Also, huge, huge, huge helplessness. Oh my goodness. Because you are seen as, okay, this society is ableist. People with disabilities are in many ways seen as inherently inferior, or their bodies or minds are seen as having a negative state of being. They're in a negative state of being. So oftentimes people view folks with disabilities as helpless. Let me just tell you, I moved several times, right? I move a lot. People who know me, they were like, yes, you do, girl. So I move a lot, and I like to travel. I like to go to different places. But I remember one time I moved, and two of my movers were deaf. And it's so funny because a person like myself, I studied, people with disabilities. I'm always around children with disabilities. And I had to catch myself. I was just like, oh, how are we going to do this? Right? And I was just like, duh, we're going to do this because they're just going to move my stuff, right? So, they wanted to read my lips, right? And also we had to type on the cell phone, right? So everything got squared away within like a minute. Like, okay, this is my stuff, you move it in the truck. And that was it, right? I didn't view them as helpless because I was like, you better than me because I don't want to lift these boxes, right? So, but a lot of people do view them as helpless, right? So they want to go out their way to help them, or they want to do certain things, or do certain things as a self-appointed ally. Not to say these are horrible things, but we see them as helpless. And also too, we see people who teach children with disabilities also as helpless as well, right? So people, special educators, special education teachers, they're sometimes viewed as helpless because they teach children with disabilities, because the way we see the children is how we see the people who teach them, right? Also, secondary gain, which is so perplexing because oftentimes people think you have one type of a disability or physical disability, that means you have an intellectual disability. I think that's what it's saying. Oh no, that's a spread effect. Actually, let's talk about that. So that's a spread effect. Spread effect is where people assume because you have made a disability in one thing, you may have a difficulty or disability in another. So, and then they get surprised that you don't have the spread effect. Like some people will talk to folks probably who have a physical disability as if they may not be able to understand or interpret what they're saying, right? Or if a person has a speech impairment, someone may think that they may not be receiving the information appropriately, right? So speech or language impairment are two different things. So if you have a speech impairment, you may have totally fine receptive skills, right, with language. But people may assume, oh, because you have a speech impediment, I may have to infantilize my language because of that, right? When I speak to you. But secondary gain is when you may do things for people to feel good, right? Oh, I donated to this organization, so I feel good about myself. Or I teach people this, so I feel good about my contribution in life, right? Or I did, I held the door out for someone who had a disability and I feel good because of that, right? But why? Why? Like they're just like everyone else, right? You shouldn't feel no different than, dealing with or doing things for a typical developing person or so-called neurotypical person. So also they're patronized and infantilized. So these two have serious cross sections. So people with disabilities are patronized and infantilized. So what does that mean? So people think of you as being less than, think of you as being helpless or being an infant, like you're not like a so-called typical person, right? So, and then they patronize you. They're like, oh, you teach children with disabilities? Oh, wow, you do that? Oh, I don't know how you guys do it. Or if you're a parent of a child with disability, oh my gosh, you must work so hard. I feel like you feel sorry for the person because they have a child with a disability. Like, oh, you poor kids. Oh, you teach those kids, they can't even spell their name. Oh, those poor kids, right? They infantilize them, but they also patronize them, right? So they look down upon folks who have a disability and the people who are parents of people with disabilities and the people who teach them as well. So there are other things that we see with microaggressive things. So remember, these are the daily things that people go deal with. So this happens every single day, definitely with someone with a disability, right? So they get second-class citizenship. So they're not given the same things as neurotypical people or so-called neurotypical developing folks. So they may be not given certain resources. They may be seen as expensive, bothersome, waste of time, waste of effort, waste of resources. Why am I investing $30,000 for a teaching assistant for one child? No, I'm not going to use that money for that child. I'm going to use it for all children, right? It's too expensive to spend this amount of money on one class versus, no, I'm going to spend the money on everyone. Everyone benefits. And we can argue about this because that may be a video I make in the long future, but talking about the lack of resources students with disabilities get in schools. I remember teaching in one school, they did not give me not one book, not one pencil, not one eraser, not one anything. I had to bring everything in that classroom. Tables, right? I had to bring my tables. Yes, I had some chairs and desks, but that's about it. Every resource, every supply I had in that classroom, I bought. How many special educators can say that? I'm sure many, right? And also, they're not given the same opportunities as others, right? So people say, like the people in this chapter that we're talking about, the Keller Gal, the one that's in the description box, people work hard not to make eye contact or physical contact with me. Like they avoid them. That's, and we do that. We do that, right? I see it a lot. We see it a lot. We do it as people, right? So people get irritated, or uh, they they just get irritated when they have to deal with a person with a disability, right? So people may ignore you. People may not want to recognize you. You're invisible in spaces. You're seen as bothersome if you're asking for certain resources or certain things because you may have a disability. So people with disabilities feel disgusted, feel avoided. They feel like people have no patience for them. They don't have the same rights as everyone else, right? So, and I can say a lot of times with special educators, they may feel like this constantly. Like, have you been disinvited or not invited to meetings for the general education teachers, where, people prioritize the students in gen ed or the general educators versus you as a special educator or your students with disabilities? I remember one time when it was, somebody was thanking all the teachers in the school, and they quite conveniently left out all the special educators. And I'm just like, at that moment, you just say, oh, I thank everybody, instead of calling out people's names. Because obviously we're not on the list because we're not important. Because you know why? Because we teach children with disabilities, right? So that sends a message to children that they're not as important. We're not as included with everyone else. And especially when you segregate them, right? You segregate them from the building. I remember being in that hallway where everyone passes by and doesn't stop in, right? Or you're in the hallway where you're not interacting with everyone else. You're in the trailer outside the building. You're in the basement, right? So a lot of kids with disabilities are treated like this. And these are microaggressive environments, right? So remember, microaggressions are, these are the daily things that we deal with every single day: commonplace, verbal, behavioral. It could be environmental. It can be an image, right? That leads to you feeling like you are being denigrated, and you get all these slights and insults because you have a disability, right? So these are just some things that you have to think about when you are impacted by people, or you come into contact with people with disabilities. And then also, if you have a disability, how are you internalizing this, right? So how are you internalizing people's messages about yourself, about how you feel about your disability? Do you then internalize it and feel inferior because of it, because that's internalized ableism? So how do you deal with those things? Please get into the comments. Please like, subscribe, share. So this is a really great article. Really, it's a chapter from a book, but it's Keller Gal are the authors, and it's going to be in the description box. So please look out for that. Also, if you want me to come work in your school or talk in your school, please go down to the description box. My email is takethemeat.spitoutthebones@gmail.com. All right. Thank you so much for listening, and I will be seeing you soon, hopefully. Bye.